Yo, what up, and welcome back to Pnoid News. Man, listen, all right, I wanted to stand here and bring you this debate that we're having at the moment about Georgia's voting laws. There's been like a full court press by, you know what I'm saying, the lamestream media to protect the Democrats, you know what I'm saying, ability to cheat in elections. And I wanted to stand here and, well, throw my 2 cents in because I'll be honest with you, I think voter ID laws, you know what I mean, should be a thing, right? Either A, we should have voter ID laws, or B, we should never be required to have ID for anything that the government does, right? Because you can't have it both ways in the end of the day. So let's talk about this. All right. So it says the New York Times analyzed the state's new 98-page voter law identified by 16 key provisions that will limit ballot access, potentially confuse voters, and give more power to Republican voters. Well, you know how this one operates, right? You know what I'm saying? Because in the end of the day, what they're basically saying is that black people are too dumb to go get, you know what I mean, the voter IDs. You know how this works. Fucking, we've all seen the fucking videos of white liberals at colleges standing here saying black people don't know where voter IDs, where the DMV is. They don't know how to use the internet, right? And then like they go to Harlem and like they stand here and talk to black people and they go, y'all don't know how to use the internet? Like, because that's what these white college liberals are saying, right? Who want to protect you and, you know what I mean, like, make sure that you never have to, you know what I mean, go get an ID to vote, right? Even though you have to have an ID to get your check cashed or any of these other things, right? We'll get into that. Anyway, right? So let's look at this, you know what I'm saying? This is a New York Times article. I wasn't going to bring up the Washington Post, but man, look, you know how that works. Every time you go to the Washington Post, the motherfuckers want money out of you. All right. So he said, you go page by page through the Georgia's new voting law, and one takeaway stands above all others. A Republican legislator and governor have made a breathtaking assertion of partisan power in elections, making absentee voting harder and creating restrictions and complications in the wake of narrow losses to Democrats. All right, so let's look at this. Voters will now have less time to request absentee ballots. There are strict new ID requirements for absentee ballots. It's now illegal for election officials to mail out absentee ballot applications to all voters. Drop boxes still exist, but barely. Mobile voting centers, RVs, where you can vote, are essentially banned. Early voting is expanded in a lot of small counties, but probably not in more populous ones. Offering food or water to voters waiting in line now risks misdemeanor charges. If you go to the wrong polling place, it will be even harder to vote. If election problems arise, a common occurrence, it is now more difficult to extend voting hours. With the mix of changes to vote counting, high turnout elections will probably mean a long wait for results. Election officials can no longer accept third-party funding. Yeah, which I think is fucking great, right? With an eye towards voter fraud, the state attorney general will manage an election hotline. Republican-controlled legislator has more power over the state election board. The secretary of state is removed as a voting member of the state election board. The GOP-led legislator is empowered to suspend many county election officials. Runoff elections will happen faster and could become harder to manage. Okay, so voters will now have less time to request absentee ballots. Let's look at this. Page 38. No earlier than 78 days or less, an 11-day period to the date of primary election or runoff, either in which the elector desires a vote. Any absentee elector may make, either by mail, or by facsimile transmission, or by electronic transmission, or in person, in the registrar's or absentee's ballot clerk's office, an application for an election official ballot of the elector's precinct to be voted at such primary runoff. All right, so it says Georgia has cut by more than half the period during which voters may request an absentee ballot from nearly 6 months before an election to less than 3. This will almost certainly reduce the number of people who seek absentee ballots and the number of people who vote in the last presidential election. 1.3 million Georgians, about 26% of the state's electorate, voted with absentee ballots. Of those returned absentee ballots, 65% voted for Biden and 34% for Donald Trump. All right, so let's look at this, because I like this, right? Legit. Page 38. In order to confirm the identity of the voter, such form shall require the elector to provide his or her name, date of birth, address as registered, address where the elector wishes the ballot to be mailed, and the number of his or her Georgia's driver's license or identification card issued. That's good. Legitimately, right? In the end of the day, like that's great. That's what it should be. Right? If such an elector does not have a Georgia driver's license or identification card, the elector shall affirm his fact In the manner prescribed in the application, the elector shall provide a copy of form of identification. The form may be available to the Secretary of State and include a space, a suffix, a photocopy, or electric image of such identification. Like birth certificate, whatever. In order to verify that the absentee ballot was voted by the elector who requested a ballot, the elector shall print the number of his or her Georgia driver's license, number identification card, in the space provided in the outer oath envelope. The elector shall also print his or her date of birth in the space provided in the outer oath envelope. If the elector does not have a Georgia driver's license or state identification card, Yep. So, previously, Georgia law required voters to simply sign their absentee ballot applications. Now they have to provide the number from a driver's license or equivalent state-issue identification. This is virtually certain to limit access to absentee voting. Why? Like, why? Seriously. Why is that a bad thing? All right, let me bring this up real quick, because I think this is important in the end of the day, right? Let me bring this one up. Okay, this here is a list of all countries, right, who, have voter identification laws. Argentina, right? In Argentina, voting is compulsory for all citizens between 18 and 70, non-compulsory to those older than 70 and between 16 and 18. Citizens with domicile in foreign countries, the vote must present a valid Documento Nacional de Identidad at the corresponding voting center. A national identification card. Australia, right? And I'm saying you have to vote in Australia. And again, not only do you have to vote, right? It's not even and here's the thing, we're allowed to, we can choose whether or not we want to exercise our rights in the end of the day, right? But here's the thing, though. In the end of the day, you have to fucking stand here and have a fucking ID identification. Brazil, right? By registering to vote, getting a voter ID called Título de Eleitor in Brazil, presenting the voter ID card when voting is optional. Report in person voting section. Present an official identificational document with photo, usually the regular identification card. Right? Canada. Show one original government issue piece of identification with photo, name, and address, like a driver's license or a health card. Right? The same thing with provincial elections in Canada, right? France, right? These are all lefty places, right? Legit. Argentina is a communist fucking country. Fucking France is, the motherfuckers they're like, hey, let's have a protest every day, right? France. France voters must prove their identity to vote at the registration, proof of address, phone, water, electric, invoice, and an identity document that proves your nationality, national identity card, or passport. Finland, right? In Finnish election, eligibles are sent a notice and the right to vote, notification of eligibility to their home address by mail. The notification of eligibility will designate a voter's polling station where voters must cast a vote. If voting on election day, advance voting is possible at any general advance polling station in Finland or abroad. Voters must present an identity document when voting. Germany uses a community-based resident registration system. Everyone eligible to vote receives a personal polling notification by mail some weeks before the election. Notification indicates the voter's precinct, polling station. Voters must present their polling notification and if asked, a piece of photo ID, identification card, passport, form of identification as a rule. Greece. Voters identify themselves by their ID cards and are given the full number of ballot papers for the constituency, plus a bank ballot paper and an empty envelope. Hungary. Voting is voluntary for all citizens 18 and older. All voters should show a photo ID and an address card to prevent the double voting. They need to register themselves if they want to vote at a different place than their address on their address card. Iceland. Voting is voluntary for all citizens 18 and older. All voters must present photo ID to vote. India, right? Look, Israel, Italy, Mexico, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, UK, and the United States, right? Legitimately fucking. Here's the thing with the United States. It said the 24th Amendment of the United States prohibits the conditioning of the right to vote in federal election on payment of a poll tax or other types of taxes as citizens of the United States. Many states have some form of voter ID requirement, which have been allowed to stand by the Supreme Court. 14 states have the strict requirement for a photo ID. This is not about, restricting individuals' rights to vote in the end of the day, right? And this is important too, right? Check this shit out. This here is the list of 24 things that require an ID to do, right? In the end of the day, To buy alcohol, right? To buy cigarettes. Hang on a minute, it's freezing up. Opening a bank account, applying for food stamps, applying for welfare, applying for Medicaid or Social Security, applying for unemployment for a job, right? Rent or buy a house or apply for a mortgage to go get a job, right? To drive by or rent a car, right? Like if you're driving a car down the road and you don't have your driver's license on you, it is literally illegal. Like, if you don't have your ID, you don't have your driver's license while you're driving, like, you can get a fine for that. Get on an airplane, get married, purchase a gun, adopt a pet, rent a motel room, applying for a hunting license, apply for a fishing license, to buy a cell phone, to visit a casino, to pick up a prescription, to hold a rally or a protest. You want to go, like, and get, whatchamacallit, one of them things at the place with the police station or at your local town hall in order to, sanction off a little piece of the John. Like, hey, look, we're going to have a rally here. We want to make sure we have the permit. You want to get the permits for that? You're going to have an ID. Blood donations, right? Buy an M-rated video game. Purchase nail polish at CVS. To buy certain cold and medical stuff, right? But not to vote. And that's some legitimate shit, right? So in the end of the day, legitimately, look, everybody should have identification to vote. If for nothing more than just for us all to go, look, man, we know this shit was legal. Everybody presented identification and nobody cheated. At least that way. And that's all we're trying to do is make sure that individuals aren't cheating because we know that people cheat. Just because y'all ain't cheating at the moment don't mean that other people aren't. And there's plenty of information on the internet to stand here and say that individuals cheat to win elections because there's power involved. And anytime there's power involved, there's going to be individuals who try to take advantage of situations that are open to do so with. And the thing is like the Democrats and the news are fully under the understanding that that's how it works. JFK got elected. You know how? Because the mob went out and literally cheated and registered dead people to vote in order to stand here and, give them the election in certain cities, in particular Chicago. It's a fact. All right? It just is what it is. Y'all look, I'm Tom Payes of Pnoid News. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.